just like to make the point that we're very fortunate that His Majesty has allowed us to use Buckingham Palace for this event, and it's a very significant event to be able to reopen it, completed and ready for action.
Something is happening inside the walls of Windsor Castle that the royal family never wanted you to find out about. Not a scandal played out in front of cameras, not a dramatic confrontation captured by the press. Something far more calculated than that. Something so quiet, so precise, and so deliberate that most people on the outside would never even notice it had happened at all. But it did happen. And according to palace insiders, what unfolded in the final hours before Princess Anne's high-profile Windsor event may have just changed the balance of power inside the British monarchy forever. Just minutes before one of the most symbolically loaded royal gatherings in recent memory was set to begin, names began disappearing from the final guest registry. Not through error, not through oversight. According to multiple sources familiar with palace operations, invitations connected to Queen Camilla's private circle were quietly, clinically, and deliberately removed without a single word of public explanation. No announcement, no apology, no clarification, just silence. And inside the House of Windsor, silence is never accidental. So the question you need to be asking right now is not simply who removed those names. The question is what that removal really means, why it happened at this specific moment in royal history, and what it tells us about the invisible war now unfolding behind palace walls between the monarchy's present and its future. Because if the whispers circulating among royal insiders are to be believed, what happened ahead of Anne's event was not a protocol adjustment, it was not a clerical error, it was a message, cold, controlled, and unmistakable. And it reportedly came directly from Prince William himself. Make sure you stay with us through every detail of this story, because what starts as a guest list controversy becomes something far deeper the longer you look at it. The atmosphere that changed everything. Let us start at the beginning, because the context matters enormously here. For months leading up to Princess Anne's Windsor gathering, those with access to palace administrative circles had reportedly been watching a subtle but unmistakable shift in the atmosphere surrounding royal operations. Staff members described it in private as a quiet tightening, a gradual but accelerating change in tone that touched everything from ceremonial planning to internal communications between royal households. On the surface, nothing appeared dramatically wrong. The monarchy was functioning, public engagements continued, the royal calendar moved forward as scheduled. But underneath that polished exterior, according to sources embedded within palace operations, something was changing in ways that went far beyond ordinary institutional adjustment. King Charles's ongoing health struggles had reportedly weakened the equilibrium of influence inside the palace in ways that were difficult to quantify publicly but impossible to ignore privately. When a monarch faces extended health challenges, the question of who actually holds operational authority behind the scenes becomes one of the most sensitive and dangerous questions in royal life. And according to insiders, that question was growing louder with every passing week. Into that uncertainty, two distinct philosophies were allegedly beginning to emerge. On one side, Queen Camilla's wider social network, which had reportedly expanded its visibility and access within royal operations considerably during Charles's reign. On the other side, an increasingly consolidated alliance between Prince William and Princess Anne, rooted in a shared belief that the institution must always come before the individual. That duty must always override social positioning. That the monarchy's survival depends not on comfort or accommodation, but on discipline and absolute clarity of hierarchy. Those two philosophies had reportedly been moving toward collision for longer than most people realized. Anne's Windsor event was simply the moment the collision became impossible to ignore. What really happened to that guest list? Now here is where the details become truly extraordinary, because what allegedly unfolded in the hours before that event is not the kind of thing royal households typically allow to happen by accident. According to palace whispers, the atmosphere inside Windsor shifted dramatically as the gathering approached. Staff members who normally operated with calm, practiced efficiency were suddenly working under what insiders described as intense scrutiny. Security personnel allegedly received updated instructions, not from their usual administrative chain, but from senior aides connected directly to Kensington Palace. Think about what that detail means for a moment. Kensington Palace is Prince William's operational base. When security teams at a royal event begin receiving instructions originating from that particular office, the significance is not subtle. It signals that someone with considerable authority has decided to take direct operational control of what should ordinarily be a routine ceremonial arrangement. And then came the guest list. According to sources familiar with palace event logistics, several names tied to Queen Camilla's private social network reportedly vanished from approved access lists altogether. The removals were described by insiders as quiet, clinical, almost surgical in their execution. There were no raised voices, no visible confrontation, no dramatic scenes unfolding in palace corridors. Just names, quietly erased from a list, and with them, access, proximity, and visibility, all gone before the event had even officially begun. Sources now claim that Prince William personally reviewed the final guest registry in the hours before the ceremony started. That detail alone reportedly sent waves through palace circles, because such direct personal intervention by the future king into the operational details of an event associated with Princess Anne is considered highly unusual under normal circumstances. It suggests this was not a decision delegated to administrative staff. It suggests William wanted to ensure this outcome personally, and that level of involvement carries an entirely different kind of weight. The symbolic weight of Anne's Windsor gathering. But why Princess Anne's event specifically? Why this gathering, at this moment? To understand that, you have to understand what Anne's Windsor event allegedly represented to those inside the palace, because according to insiders, it was never simply a formal royal engagement. The gathering reportedly centered around institutions deeply tied to Queen Elizabeth II's long-standing vision for the monarchy. Organizations viewed internally not merely as charities or ceremonial bodies, but as extensions of the late Queen's personal legacy and the foundational philosophy that defined her decades of service. Within the House of Windsor, anything connected to Elizabeth's legacy carries weight that outsiders rarely fully appreciate. The late Queen remains, even now, the defining standard against which royal purpose, duty, and institutional discipline are measured. Her philosophy, institution before individual, continuity before comfort, structure before popularity, is treated by certain members of the royal family not as history, but as living doctrine. And according to palace observers, no two members of the current royal family embody that doctrine more completely than Princess Anne and Prince William. Sources familiar with internal planning now allege that William played a direct role in shaping the structure of Anne's event long before invitations were finalized. Private consultations between the two reportedly took place across several weeks, with discussions focused not only on ceremonial protocol, but on the message the gathering would quietly send during what everyone close to the palace understands is one of the most fragile chapters in modern royal history. Some senior staff members privately referred to the gathering in the days leading up to it as a restoration moment. That phrase alone tells you everything you need to know about how those closest to William and Anne interpreted its purpose. This was not just an event. This was allegedly a statement, a quiet but unmistakable declaration that the old guard was reasserting itself, that the values shaped by Queen Elizabeth II were not fading, and that Prince William was prepared to defend those values with the full force of whatever institutional authority he currently possessed. Ask yourself this: if the event was truly just ceremonial, why would it require personal review of the guest list by the future king? Why would security protocols change at the last minute? Why would access routes be revised hours before guests arrived? These are not the actions of someone treating an occasion as routine. These are the actions of someone who understood exactly what the event meant and was determined that nothing would dilute that meaning. The moment Camilla's circle realized what had happened. Now let us talk about what allegedly happened when Camilla's circle realized what had occurred, because this is where the story shifts from institutional maneuvering into something far more personal and far more emotionally significant. According to palace sources, the removed guests did not discover their credentials had been revoked through any kind of official communication. There was no prior notice, no explanation offered in advance. Instead, several individuals connected to Camilla's private network reportedly attempted to present their credentials upon arrival and discovered, to their apparent shock, that their access had already been revoked. Security checkpoints had been updated. Access permissions had been changed. Individuals who had reportedly expected to move freely through designated areas of Windsor found themselves quietly redirected, their credentials flagged during review, their anticipated proximity to the gathering suddenly and completely closed off. One royal observer described the strategy as surgical rather than dramatic. Every move appeared designed to avoid visible public chaos while still delivering a message that could not possibly be misread by those on the receiving end. And here is perhaps the most devastating detail of everything that has emerged about this story. Sources claim that Queen Camilla herself was not informed in advance about the removals. She allegedly learned the full extent of what had happened through a series of frantic private calls from individuals within her circle who had already experienced the rejection firsthand. By the time she reportedly became aware of the situation, the event had already begun. The operation was already complete. The decision had already been made, executed, and sealed without her knowledge. Think about the significance of that for a moment. The Queen Consort of Britain reportedly discovered that members of her own private social network had been removed from a royal event, not through any official communication, not through any courtesy notification from palace staff, but through confused and desperate phone calls from guests who had already been turned away. For those who understand the culture of the British royal family and the profound symbolic weight of access, proximity, and institutional visibility within that culture, the emotional impact of that realization would be difficult to overstate. This was not simply an administrative correction. This was a demonstration, a very deliberate, very controlled, and very calculated demonstration of exactly where authority within the modern monarchy currently resides. The silence that said everything. In the immediate aftermath of the event, reports suggest several individuals connected to the removed guest list privately contacted palace offices searching for explanations. Some allegedly assumed there had been a technical error. Others reportedly believed security staff had acted independently without higher authorization. But as hours passed and no clarification emerged, the mood inside Camilla's wider circle reportedly shifted from confusion to something closer to disbelief. And then came the silence that changed everything. Buckingham Palace reportedly declined to address questions surrounding the guest changes at all. Kensington Palace maintained the same disciplined, unwavering silence despite mounting curiosity from media circles and growing anxiety among royal correspondents. Senior staff members were privately instructed, according to insiders, to avoid conversations about the guest removals entirely, even within internal administrative discussions. For veteran palace observers, that level of coordinated silence was extraordinary. In the normal rhythm of royal operations, moments of internal tension are almost always softened through discreet briefings, carefully worded off-the-record guidance, or quiet reassurances designed to keep speculation from spiraling out of control. The institutional machinery of royal communications is extraordinarily skilled at managing difficult narratives before they become uncontrollable. None of that happened this time. Not a single quiet clarification, not one carefully placed briefing, just absolute, coordinated, and apparently deliberate silence from every quarter of the palace simultaneously. And within royal culture, that kind of silence does not happen by accident. It happens when someone in a position of significant authority has decided that the message being sent does not require softening, that the statement has been made and it will stand exactly as it is. Prince William, for his part, reportedly continued public appearances without acknowledging the growing speculation surrounding the Windsor controversy in any form. No gestures toward reconciliation, no subtle signals meant to ease the tension surrounding Camilla's circle. Just a continuation of royal duties conducted with what multiple insiders described as complete and absolute composure. Several observers have since noted that this particular quality of composure, unwilling to apologize, unwilling to explain, unwilling to retreat, represents something genuinely new in how the future king projects authority. This is not the William who once seemed to struggle under the weight of public expectation and family pressure. This is a William who appears to have decided that institutional authority speaks for itself, and that those who need an explanation have already received one in the only language that truly matters inside the House of Windsor. The Anne and William alliance nobody saw coming. Now we need to talk about the alliance at the heart of this story, because nothing about what happened at Windsor can be fully understood without understanding the relationship between Prince William and Princess Anne. For decades, Princess Anne has occupied a unique and quietly extraordinary position within the British monarchy. She has never pursued the kind of media fascination or public mystique that surrounds other senior royals. She has never relied on popularity, glamour, or carefully managed public narrative to maintain her standing within the institution. Her authority has always come from something far more durable than any of those things: discipline, consistency, an absolute, unwavering belief that the institution must survive regardless of personal cost, personal discomfort, or personal relationship. That philosophy has reportedly left a deep and lasting impression on Prince William, particularly as the pressures surrounding the future of the crown have intensified over recent years. According to Palace Whispers, William has increasingly come to view Anne not simply as a respected aunt, but as one of the last remaining figures within the royal family, capable of genuinely guiding the monarchy through an era defined by uncertainty, internal division, and relentless public scrutiny. Sources familiar with royal operations claim their private consultations became more frequent and more strategically focused following Queen Elizabeth II's death, with discussions reportedly centering on royal appearances, institutional priorities, and long-term planning for the future crown in ways that go considerably beyond ordinary family communication. Several insiders now believe Anne's influence over William stems fundamentally from their shared conviction that monarchy survives only when duty remains stronger than personal alliances. That the moment social positioning begins to compete with institutional structure, the foundations of the crown itself begin to weaken. According to palace interpretations, that conviction shaped every decision surrounding the Windsor event. And for those watching from within royal circles, the gathering became the first unmistakable public evidence of that alliance operating at full strength. Together, insiders describe William and Anne as increasingly viewing the monarchy not as a collection of competing personalities navigating their own ambitions, but as an institution that must endure through discipline, restraint, and absolute clarity of purpose across generations. That is a philosophy Queen Elizabeth II embodied completely, and according to those closest to palace operations, it is a philosophy that her grandson and her daughter are now quietly but decisively reasserting inside the institution she spent her entire life building. What this means for King Charles. But what does all of this mean for King Charles? And what does it mean for the balance of power within the monarchy going forward? According to Palace Whispers, Charles remains trapped in what insiders describe as an increasingly painful position. Throughout his reign, he has reportedly struggled to maintain a delicate and emotionally taxing balance between his loyalty to Camilla and his recognition of William's rising institutional authority, combined with Anne's enduring influence over royal philosophy. Sources close to the palace now suggest that Charles may have been informed about the full details of what happened ahead of Anne's event only after much of the situation had already unfolded. That detail, if accurate, carries its own remarkable significance. It would suggest that William's decision to reshape the guest registry was not coordinated with or cleared through the reigning monarch in advance. It would suggest that William acted from his own institutional authority, independently, decisively, and without waiting for his father's approval. Several insiders have described Charles as emotionally exhausted by the competing pressures of his reign. His health struggles have reportedly weakened his capacity to actively mediate the tensions between different factions within the royal household. And according to palace observers, that exhaustion may have inadvertently created the space William needed to act with the kind of authority he displayed at Windsor. Because while Charles reportedly favors stability, patience, and the avoidance of open conflict, William increasingly appears willing, even prepared, to act with decisive firmness when he believes institutional boundaries are at risk. Those two approaches to royal management are not simply different in style. They are, according to some observers, fundamentally different visions of what the monarchy requires in order to survive. And at Windsor, one of those visions reportedly asserted itself with unmistakable clarity. A new royal order already taking shape. The broader implications of what happened are ones that royal observers are still working through, and will likely be working through for some considerable time. Reports suggest that members of Camilla's wider social network are now privately grappling with a level of institutional anxiety they were not prepared for. Individuals who had believed their proximity to the reigning monarch guaranteed long-term security and access within royal circles are reportedly questioning that assumption with an urgency that did not exist before Windsor. For years, influence within royal operations was understood, at least by some, to flow primarily through personal relationships, through social alliances built carefully over time, through proximity to the king and the access that proximity conferred. But what allegedly unfolded at Anne's event sent a very different message about how influence within the modern monarchy may now be defined. Access is not guaranteed by personal relationship alone. Social standing does not automatically translate into institutional standing, and proximity to the present monarch does not necessarily protect against decisions made by the future one. Those are not small realizations. Within a culture as intensely hierarchical as the British royal family, they represent a fundamental recalibration of how power within the institution is understood and exercised. Palace observers now describe William as operating with a level of assertiveness that would have been difficult to imagine even a year ago. The combination of public pressure, family instability, and Charles's health challenges has reportedly accelerated a transformation in the future king that those closest to him say was always coming, but has arrived faster than many expected. William, according to insiders, no longer appears interested in managing internal friction through accommodation, patience, or diplomatic softening. He appears to have decided that institutional discipline requires clarity, that clarity sometimes requires discomfort, and that protecting the long-term integrity of the monarchy is worth the short-term turbulence that decisiveness inevitably creates. The question that lingers over Windsor. And yet, for all the extraordinary details surrounding this story, perhaps the most revealing thing about what happened at Windsor is not any single action or decision. It is the silence, the deep, coordinated, absolute silence that followed. In an institution as sophisticated in its communications as the British royal family, silence of this scale and this duration is never accidental. It is chosen, and when it is chosen deliberately, it tells you something that no press briefing ever could. It tells you that the people who made the decision believe they were right, that they have no intention of softening the message they sent, that they are entirely comfortable allowing the consequences of their actions to stand without explanation or apology. That is not the posture of someone who doubts themselves. That is not the posture of someone managing a crisis or scrambling for damage control. That is the posture of someone who believes they acted from legitimate authority and is entirely prepared for the world to understand it exactly that way. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is what makes the Windsor controversy feel less like an isolated incident and more like a preview of something much larger. A glimpse into the way the British monarchy may increasingly operate as it moves toward the next chapter of its history, quieter, more institutional, more strategically controlled, and far less willing to subordinate structural discipline to the demands of personal relationship or social access. What comes next for the royal family? So where does this leave the royal family now? According to insiders, the tensions exposed by the Windsor controversy are not going away. The divisions that surfaced so dramatically in the final hours before Anne's event reflect pressures that have been building for months, possibly years, and are deeply rooted in fundamentally different visions of what the modern monarchy should prioritize. Camilla's allies reportedly remain deeply unsettled, privately questioning how much operational authority William may already be exercising behind the scenes and how much further that authority may extend in the months and years ahead. Charles, by most accounts, finds himself in an emotionally and physically exhausting position, caught between loyalty to his wife, the rising institutional force of his son, and the enduring influence of his sister. And William and Anne, according to those closest to palace operations, continue their quiet but increasingly visible alliance, guided by a shared philosophy shaped in the long shadow of Queen Elizabeth II and sharpened by the pressures of one of the most turbulent periods in the modern history of the Crown. Several royal commentators now believe that what happened at Windsor will eventually be recognized not as an isolated guest list controversy, but as one of those pivotal behind-the-scenes moments that mark the beginning of a genuine transition. Not a formal transfer of power, not a dramatic public rupture, but a quiet, controlled, and irrevocable shift in where authority within the British monarchy actually resides. The smallest decisions, as those inside the House of Windsor understand better than anyone, often reveal the biggest shifts in power. A few names removed from a guest list. No public confrontation, no dramatic statement, just silence. And yet somehow, according to everyone who was watching closely from inside palace walls, the message was received with perfect clarity. The question now is not whether power inside the British monarchy is shifting. The evidence suggests it already has. The question is how far that shift will go, how quickly it will accelerate, and what it will ultimately mean for every single person whose influence, access, and standing within the crown depends on understanding where the real authority now lies. If the Windsor event was the warning, what comes next may be something none of them are ready for. And if William is truly prepared to act with this level of quiet, calculated decisiveness now, before he has even formally assumed the throne, then the monarchy that emerges under his reign may look very different from anything the royal family, or the world watching it, currently expects. That is not speculation. According to those closest to the situation, it is already beginning. If you found this video valuable, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss another update. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Prince William went too far? Or was this exactly the kind of decisive leadership the monarchy needs right now? We read every single comment.